We continue reading through chapter 5 of the Gospel of Mark. When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side of the lake, a great crowd collected around him as he stood on the shore. Then came a man called Jairus, one of the synagogue presidents. And when he saw Jesus, he knelt down before him, pleading desperately for his help. Now, just a quick reminder, so far in the gospel, every time there's been someone who has been one of the authorities, they've come into conflict with Jesus. They even went so far as Jesus having to sort of shame them about him healing a man on the Sabbath. Now, here's a man who is in a similar position, and he comes up to Jesus, and here's why. I'm sorry I keep interrupting, but too bad. He knelt before him, pleading desperately for his help. "My little girl is dying," he said. "Will you come and put your hands on her? Then she will get better and live." Jesus went off with him, followed by a large crowd jostling at his elbow. Among them was a woman who had suffered from hemorrhages for 12 years and who had gone through a great deal at the hand of many doctors, spending all her money in the process. She had derived no benefit from them, but on the contrary, was getting worse. This woman had heard about Jesus and came up behind him under cover of the crowd and touched his cloak. "For if I can only touch his clothes," she kept saying, "I shall be all right." The hemorrhage was stopped immediately, and she knew in herself she was cured of her trouble. At once Jesus knew intuitively that power had gone out of him, and he turned around in the middle of the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" His disciples replied, "You can see this crowd jostling you. How can you ask who touched me?" But he looked all round at their faces to see who had done it. Then the woman, scared and shaking all over because she knew that she was the one to whom this thing had happened, came and flung herself before him and told him the whole story. But he said to her, "Daughter, it's your faith that has healed you. Go home in peace. Be free from your trouble." While he was still speaking, messengers arrived from the synagogue president's house, saying, "Your daughter is dead. There's no need to bother the master any further." But when Jesus heard this message, he said to the president of the synagogue, "No, don't be afraid. Just go on believing." Then he allowed no one to follow him, except Peter and James and John, James's brother. They arrived at the president's house, and Jesus noticed the hubbub and all the weeping and wailing. And as he went in, he said to the people in the house, "Why are you making such a noise with your crying? The child is not dead. She's fast asleep." They greeted this with scornful laughs. But Jesus turned them all out, and taking only the father and mother and his own companions with him, went into the room where the child was. Then he took the little girl's hand and said to her in Aramaic, "Little girl, I tell you, get up." At once she jumped to her feet and walked around the room, for she was 12 years old. This sight sent the others nearly out of their minds with joy. But Jesus gave them strict instructions not to let anyone know what had happened, and ordered food to be given to the little girl. That's the end of chapter 5. We've just seen a couple healings, In one, there was a man who was out of his mind that he healed and told him, go tell people. And here, people seeing a healing go out of their minds with joy, to use the wording here. And he tells them also, quiet, keep it down a little bit. Don't tell everybody. Word got around. Otherwise, we wouldn't be hearing about it. Anyway, tomorrow we'll pick it up with chapter 6.